Yo, what's up guys? Hey, listen, Gaming here, and I cannot wait for this episode. It is going to be so fun. We've got an absolute load to get through, and I'll explain all of that in a minute, but before we do that, I'm just going to clip into what we did last time. So last time we finally managed to beat Girahim, we managed to get the Eldin tablet, and now we can go down to the volcanic area below. In the episode prior to that, we also looked at Skyview Temple and what that could possibly be, what it has been, and I really enjoyed the theory work there. So I thought I'd delve a little bit more into that, and we're going to change up the format a little bit. Before we get to that stage though, we've got a side quest to do, and that side quest involves Batreaux. Now, this little part of the game is going to have a bit of backtracking and a bit of sidetracking, because that's what side quests do. As a result of that, we're going to speed things up a little. So every now and again you're going to hear me play the double song of time, and we're just going to speed through that area. Now, the side quest that we're on looks currently at a character called Batreaux. And that kind of led me on to doing my own little personal side quest. So today, as discussed previously, we're going to have a look at Batreaux and just who he is, what he is, and speculatively come up with an idea. The idea that we're going to be looking at is going to be story-based. And that's where the slight change in format comes. I'm really excited to be able to bring that to you because for me it's something a little bit different and I think it's going to work really well. So just to make things aware, again today we have no backing audio. It is really close to being fixed, however it is still like this for at least this and the next episode. I can't wait to get the backing audio back. Having to find all the backing tracks has been an absolute pain, but I think we've done really well with it, and I still think things have done well in terms of progression with the storyline. Now, like I said, today is a bit of a special episode. It doesn't just contain one, it actually contains up to 4 possible theories. We're going to be covering Batreaux and the current side quest that we've just started. We're going to be covering the Mogma, and with the Mogma come a potential of 3 possible theories for what actually happened to them. So as a result of that, they are the main topic of today's episode, and they will begin at about the 14-minute mark if you want to skip ahead. But because we're definitely seeing him in this episode at least, I figured we'd try and do a little bit on Batreaux, even though he's a very difficult character to theorise on. He's only really difficult per se because there isn't much in terms of backstory for Batreaux. He is a character at the very beginning of his journey, as it were. And as a result of that, it can be quite difficult to be able to come up with any possible ideas for what he is, why he is, or what has made him the way he is now. But that's what we're going to try and get to. So, we're just about to head back now and go get our head down for a little bit of rest. And when we wake up, we'll be able to have a proper look at Batreaux and his story within Skyward Sword. Beneath Skyloft lives a sinister evil, something so terrifying that it keeps all children inside at night time. For should anyone look upon this creature as it roams the graveyard, it shall paralyse its victims with the fear at the sight of it. Once he has left his victims helpless, he drags them to his underground lair where they are never seen again. He is a winged, dark creature that presides over the night and acts as its warden, leaving its home only to feed on the people of Skyloft's gratitude. This evil is known only to the people of Skyloft as the Monster, but he has another name. His name is Batreaux. Batreaux is the stuff of legend in Zelda. A demonic entity that only comes out in the dead of night, something so evil that people who are said to see it never live to tell the tale. But when we meet Batreaux, he's far from this, and actually turns out to be one of the nicest characters within the game. So, what is his deal? Who is Batreaux, and why is everyone so terrified of him? Let's take a look today in our first of 4 theories. Okay, so to start off with, we need to do a little bit of unraveling because there's a lot to unpack here. Batreaux shows up in the Lost Child side quest. where Kukiel, a young girl, has gone missing from her bed, and she's not been seen for nearly a day. You are tasked with finding her upon your return to Skyloft once beating the game's first dungeon, Skyview Temple. Before you can go and find her though, you must speak to a survivor of one of Batreaux's victimizations, a chap called Rooster at the Lumpy Pumpkin. Rooster describes Batreaux during this interaction as a demon, not a monster, and states that no one has ever seen it and lived to tell the tale. He then gives us a precautionary tale about not going into the graveyard at night in Skyloft, because Rooster claims he saw the monster hit a gravestone nearest the tree and then push it after it lit up. So naturally, you do what you're told not to do, and in the middle of the night head to the graveyard, where you do exactly as Rooster described. Your sword rings off the headstone, and soon you are met with a glowing sigil upon the stone. You head to the front of the rock and proceed to push it, which in turn leads to a nearby shed door opening. Apprehensive of what you may find, you head inside and find a ladder, seemingly 15 feet long or more, which you look down from the top of. There is nothing but a small ledge made of rock, and then planks of wood to walk across. Whatever it is down there does not want you getting to him, that much is for sure. A shriek is heard, followed by another. The first one's more guttural though, like one of the many monster cries you've heard on your journey so far. You need to hurry. You slide down the ladder and proceed across the rickety wood, before finally reaching a door. You twist the handle and push your way into the house to find a small girl waiting on the inside, stood next to a tall, winged creature. It stands over 6 feet tall, maybe larger still. It has two large, red, twisted horns upon its head, which seem to add in an extra 2 feet to his height. His eyes are bright yellow and massive, and upon his hands are the longest, strongest nails you've ever seen, sharpened at the end to make claws. But the rest of him is not a monster at all. His face, though turned a blue-grey colour, is Skyloftian. His ears fit this description also, and the rest of his body resembles a normal man. This is Batreaux. What exactly is he? Is he a demon? A monster? A man? Or just highly misunderstood? The answer in all truth is probably a good mix of all four. So let's try to unpack this from the beginning of the quest going forward. When you first receive the quest, Kukiel's mother, Rinna, states that someone else even said they'd seen her carried off by a monster. There's nothing unusual about this other than a child being carried off by a monster, but this fits the description of the side quest. That is until you go see Rooster in the Lumpy Pumpkin, who states that it's not a monster but rather a demon. So let's start there, and let's take a look at those two words and why there's such a distinction. A monster is defined as a large, ugly and frightening imaginary creature. This is in comparison to a demon, which is defined as an evil spirit or devil, especially one thought to possess a person or act as a tormentor in hell. There is quite a large difference between the two. A monster is often seen as large, ugly and frightening, but not necessarily evil. The word is still a negative word, so it makes us think badly of monsters, but not all monsters are necessarily bad. Even in the Zelda game, this is true, as brainwashing is a phenomenon that happens all too regularly, with Naboru in Ocarina of Time being the most notable in this instance. She was brainwashed into being a monster. She was not one to begin with, and in fact ends up being one of the 6 sages. But Batreaux is not a brainwashed creature, at least not that we know of. However, when we look at the descriptions we just went through, Bats is definitely a monster and not a demon. This is solidified by Bats himself, as he describes himself as a monster. The only thing he references as demonic are his eyes, but that seems to be more to do with how he sees himself rather than anything else. Rooster is in fact the only person that actually describes him as a demon. The only reason for this seems to be that by describing him as a demon, he believes that he will keep the children of Skyloft safe. He even warns us not to go near the graveyard, as no one's seen it and lived to tell the tale. All of this sounds like hyperbole, and he even stumbles when you, as the hero, question him about having survived. As you find Batreaux's cave, Kukiel is with him. The two of them explain that they were playing a game of who could scream the loudest, but never once does Kukiel describe Bats as a demon or even a monster. She just claims that he's a nice man. When you talk to Batreaux, he actually contradicts your conversation with Rooster. He states that he has been seen by people, but people are struck with paralysing fear at the mere sight of him. This does not mean they did not survive, and Rooster's own reluctancy to answer the question about his own survival does indeed that he, and his classification of Batreaux as a demon, is nothing more than hyperbole, designed to scare the people of Skyloft away from the graveyard at night, especially children. But what does him being a monster have to do with where he came from? You might be surprised by this, but everything. See, a demon is thought to possess or act as a tormentor in hell. Batreaux is no tormentor, and he doesn't seem to possess people nor be possessed himself, as he not only has but shows emotion at the fact that he is disgusted by his form. He knows of a way as well to turn himself from a monster into a human. Demons wouldn't know nor care. about the capability unless they were shapeshifting. Within the Zelda universe, we learn that monsters are more often or not the result of a curse. The Kokiri Forest in Ocarina of Time becomes a cursed area because of monsters when the protection from the curse is gone, i.e. the Deku Tree. And the Lost Woods transform humans into Stalfos when they get lost as a result of the curse from the Gerudo King. These curses exist throughout the series. Majora's Mask is a scientist turned into a half-human, half-Gibdo hybrid. A monster, if you will, as a result of a curse caused by the Skull Kid. The Minish Cap's Ezlo is turned into a hat from being a brilliant sorcerer by Vati. Curses are all too commonplace in Hyrule, within now and the future, so a curse being the cause of Batreaux's misery would be no surprise. The biggest indication of this being a curse though is the item that you get for collecting enough gratitude crystals in order to turn Batreaux back into being human again. A chest appears, and as you go to open it, Batreaux nearly begs you not to open the chest. He explains his actions, stating inside is a medal that stops a hero from being able to use his item pouch, but in a quid pro quo trade-off, it also allows the user to find more rupees and treasures. It's a literal deal with the devil. Even as you speak to him about this, he's actually enticed by the medal. It seems as if he wants it for himself, like it's calling out for him to keep it. This item is even called the Cursed Medal. So my theory is this: Batreaux was once human. He was a poor man and lived within Skyloft. In accordance with his tabard, it would seem as if he knew of the Sheikah tribe, possibly having heard stories of the Great Magical Tribe. Of course though, they were high in the air, whereas the Sheikah hadn't been around for years, at least not to anyone's knowledge. But I think he wanted to be one of them. I think he wanted to be a Sheikah. In his obsession, he would learn of a series of medals imbued with Sheikah magic. If he could just claim that magic for his own, then surely he would reignite the Sheikah's population. He just needs to find one, or more of them. He searched and finally found one underneath Skyloft in a small cavern. It was so hidden away, he would need to toil to get to it. As it stood, there was no real way to get to it, so he would have to fashion a bridge of sorts in order to travel to the cave. But there was still a heavy risk of falling from the island in the sky. For days he struggled, operating only at night, in case of poachers trying to steal his idea throughout the day. Finally, he made it to the cave, and inside found a chest. He pushed the lid open and a golden light enveloped him before he reached out and grabbed the contents. One singular large golden coin with a purple rim, and in the centre were two piercing eyes. At first he did not know what this medal could do, but still he put the cord on around his neck and suddenly felt a surge enter his body. He felt compelled to put his hand into a nearby pot, which he did, and when he pulled out a green rupee, it was followed by another. This was odd. They only normally contain one rupee. He soon learned that he would be able to exploit this, and made several wallets out of materials which he began to fill. The wealth he had obsessed with was finally his. He spent days doing this, filling his wallets with newly acquired rupees, but with every action comes an equal and opposite reaction. The painful, agonizing growth of wings, and those horns. He had unwittingly made a deal with the devil, and in doing so, turned himself into the monster he had dealt with. The only way to break it was to make people thankful for what they have, something he had not been. This story is reflected a few times within the Zelda universe. The Gold Skulltula family in Ocarina of Time and Giovanni in Twilight Princess tell the story of how greed can be a curse, and it makes a lot of sense that this would then reappear in Skyward Sword. So, that's the story of Batreaux. Stay tuned for some more crazy theories in just this episode. We have got a lot to go through with the Mogma in just a bit. The Mogma are a race of mole-like humanoid intelligent creatures that dwell within the highly dangerous Eldin volcano. They, like the Kikwi, are unique to Skyward Sword, but just like with the Kikwi, their existence begs a question. With a game that is so focused on what is to come within the world of Zelda, and the seeds it plants throughout the series, immediately what comes to mind when you first meet the Mogma is what happened to them? So today, that's what we're here to answer. What happened to the Mogma? And in order to cover all bases, as this is a pretty crazy topic to cover, we will look at 3 possible outcomes for what happened to the original furries of the Zelda universe. But before we do that, let's take a deeper look at the race. The Mogma, for a lack of a better way of putting it, are almost a perfect crossbreed of human and mole. They are bipedal like a human, and have hair and facial hair that looks more human than mole. But they also have very rodent-like main features, including sharp pointed facial structures and fur adorning their entire bodies. They have long pointed ears that lay flat and outward of the skull, presumably to help them be able to hear more accurately underground, and have sharp claws designed to help them dig through said tunnels. After all, like moles, the Mogma have a tendency to pop up in a random location behind or in front of you during different passages of the game, and this is due to their channeling of tunnels which they do at a quick speed to get from location to location. They use this ability in order to look for treasure, which seems to be a little bit of an obsession for the mole-like creatures. What they do with the treasure is unknown, but due to the fact that their armor is incredibly crude and they wield no weaponry, and they don't seem to be an advanced civilization that builds, farms and creates to survive, it could be safely assumed that somewhere within Hyrule there's a stash of treasure that was once hoarded by the Mogma. Or maybe there are many small stashes, if each piece of treasure is owned by the Mogma who found it. This could be used to explain so many of the random locations with treasure in it within Hyrule in future games. Thousands of years ago, the Mogma gained access to these areas, and as Hylians built atop of the hidden treasures, the items that the Mogma so coveted got lost, not to be seen again until a nosy child should happen to stumble into a grotto hole. But that's not what we're here to investigate today, as the Mogma are no more. From the moment, in fact, that the Minish Cap comes out, we have no sign of the Mogma anywhere. They've disappeared completely from the world. So what did happen to the race of Hyrule's treasure hunters? It's clear that they died out and became extinct, but how? Let's take a look today at 3 of the internet's favourite theories and try to flesh them out a little bit more so we can get a better understanding of what happened to the Mogma. Natural selection. It is a sad fact that the Mogma are predominantly male. Why is that sad? Because if a race is mainly made up of one gender, and that one gender on its own, unless asexual, cannot continue to procreate, and that means that the race dies out over time. This leads us to theory 1 about what happened to the Mogma, and that is natural selection. Natural selection is a process in which populations of living organisms adapt and change. These adaptations are made through the breeding process, and any changes that are made are done so in order to help the survival rate of a species. We explored this a little with the Kikwi, and in that episode I brought up the Zora and the Rito, and how fish-like creatures grew wings in order to help them survive. We see in the Wind Waker, the Rito are a race of creatures that actually seem to be half human, half bird. The need for the Zoras to survive came about as a cause of the Great Flood. So, those procreating with this odd human-bird hybrid seems to be the next logical step. Following the steps of human mating with bird, and then the offspring of this mating with a Zora, seems to be the most obvious step for how this all occurred in such a short amount of time. The Kikwi, through my estimations, likely did exactly the same to survive. They firmed their chances of survival by breeding with other plants and fauna, and eventually that would lead to their change into the Deku. However, not every race manages to do this. Some unfortunately don't make it through the process of natural selection, and some fail to procreate with other species. Some, especially those made up of a predominantly male basis, would not only therefore struggle to procreate with other species, but have no females in order to sire offspring with. And as a result, those species would eventually die out. But that's too easy. The Mogma die out because of a lack of females? No. There must have been female entities within the Mogma, right? I don't think it can be just that easy. So let's start with that. Why there can't just be males within the Mogma community. And that is actually really easy to find. During Skyward Sword, you meet 12 Mogma. That doesn't mean that the whole race is made up of 12 of them in total, because they're half mole, half human. They would be underground, or digging around, searching for treasure. 3 of these, Bronzy, Plats and Silver, are brothers. As you can't tell age by looking at them, it wouldn't be certain that these would be from the same litter. But certainly they all came from the same mother. I also think it would be safe to assume that these all came from the same father, and that father is likely to be Gold. This is because of the name of the characters more than anything. After all, Bronze, Silver, Gold and Platinum, or Bronzy, Silver, Gold and Plats, are known for being a family of precious metals, so this would make sense. As it stands then, we found that 4 of the 12 are from within the same family group. The other 8 though? Let's take a look. Lead and Cobalt are often found together on treasure hunts, but Cobalt is more of a sarcastic friend or even maybe a bully to Lead. There's no time that these two reference each other as brothers, so I think it would be safe to assume that they're not related. and they certainly have a relationship that is a lot more abusive than not. Zank, Taito, Knuckle, Mirko, and Quartz are all found singularly, and again make no reference to family. Now, I can't say for certain that any of these aren't related, but usually within the Zelda universe, if there is a link between characters, then it is made somewhat obvious. Tuba is an anomaly to the rest of the group. He runs a game, the Thrill Digger, and believes more money can be made in serving treasure hunters than being one himself. This actually takes us back to an earlier question, with what the Mogma do with the treasure, and it would appear as though they sell the treasure for money, though it's really not clear what use the money is, because they don't seem to spend it on any technology that keeps them alive. Either way, Tuba is 100% his own man, mole, whatever he is, but I would safely say he is unrelated to any of the Mogma as well. So this means that we have a potential of 8 different families within the Mogma species that we've seen. This cannot and does not account for any that we haven't seen, who are potentially still underground. But this does mean that we have to have had 8 different females at some stage in time within the last generation. This would mean that females have to exist within the Mogma world, and even if they are rarer than males, we could not have had the males that we have without the females having existed. If we're to presume that there are at least 8 different females still in existence somewhere, then we can likely presume the possibility of 8 other families within the Mogma community. So, actually as it stands, while this race is still small, it is a lot larger than we've given credit for, and many more Mogma live beneath the ground. As a result of this, just stating natural selection is the reason for the Mogma's lack of survival is pretty much the easy way out option. And when we look into it a little more, I don't think we can actually state this concretely without considering the fact that there must have been females in civilization prior to this generation. However, Skyward Sword and the Minish Cap are more than one generation apart. It seems to be like the gap is quite large between the games, and therefore there is still plenty of time for all females and therefore all males also to die out. This means that this actually still is a credible answer to what happened to the Mogma, but it could also happen to any race within Hyrule. Like I said before though, this is a very cut and shut answer, and it's almost too easy. It's not fun in comparison to some of the other potentials for what could have happened to the furry race. So let's get further into those, and let's start with the idea of hunting. Hunted to extinction. Throughout history, we have seen time and time again species hunted by humankind to their end. The Tasmanian tiger, the great oak, and the Caribbean monk seal were all hunted to extinction within the 19th and 20th century by humans seeking furs, tusks, and teeth. As time goes on, more species are on the cusp of extinction on our planet. While Hyrule seems to be peaceful towards its fauna and wildlife, it would not be hard to imagine creatures being hunted for their goods. After all, when we kill any creature in Skyward Sword at least, they drop consumables for us to upgrade our equipment with. On top of that, all of the materials for your items that sit within your inventory must have come from somewhere. For instance, the adventure pouch. That's made entirely of leather, so an equivalent animal such as a cow must face their end in order to be a sacrifice for the handy tool to be created. The same goes for armour. Many armours in the game are made from cloth or metal though, so perhaps we can rule these out in as much as being part of the murder of innocent animals. Even down to the shield braces, they're made of a leather material. The slingshot has an element of leather used within the section that holds the seed, and the Mogma mitts for the claws that aid with digging. It's in fact these particular items that we should really look towards. Whilst the original digging and Mogma mitts were given to us by the Mogma, indicating that a pair was at least made for human use, and were possibly made by the Mogma, you can imagine the fashion trends following the hero of the sky's adventures within the world. As the news spreads of your heroism against the deadly evil, you would be emulated by townsfolk. We just need to see the current trends and how when a celebrity tends to back an item, how well it soars in sale numbers. These people cannot be the hero of the skies, but they can indeed copy and be just like their chosen hero. At first, it's fashionable to look towards adorning a tunic of some form, possibly the same form worn by the hero, but tunics are already really popular in Skyloft, and they've been worn by the Academy students for years. It's only the armour that's built into your tunic that really sets you apart, that and a dark green colouring. So with tunics already being popular, we start to look towards the items carried by the legendary hero. So You may well find as you wander around Skyloft that more people are carrying swords now, or at least learning sword art. They learn to fight as the hero did. Some, though, can't wield a sword successfully. They're not naturals to the art form. So they move to bows or slingshots. The items that help save the world would help again should there not be a hero to rescue these people in trying times. So this will play a massive part in the recreation of weapons and armour. Here in the stories, researchers would look further into your wide range of equipment. Swords, done to death. Bows, commonplace. We need something different. Something that could potentially help the people hide in a worst case scenario. Now, there aren't many items that you carry that aren't imbued with the magic of Hylia, such as the harp, the beetle, or even the whip. These artifacts, let's face it, are impossible to recreate until we can get our hands on some Sheikah technology. So, we're not going to be trying those. In fact, actually when you look at it, the only real item in your possession is a small pair of gloves, with sharp spikes poking out through the top of where the fingers are. The gloves are made of a material by the seams of things, but that could be easily upgraded. The spikes, though, they come from something specific. They come from a mole-like creature that is thought to roam and live in Eldin. One beautifully sunny day, you are woken up by what sounds like a procession. A solid marching of left and right. A slight whistling from the men that are moving with pace throughout the town in Skyloft. Since this place dropped from the skies and the top of wherever the cursed location was, there have been more efforts than ever by people to explore and understand what is around. But nothing like this has happened so far. You rub your eyes, blinking twice before lifting yourself out of bed. Swinging your legs around, you reach for the armoured tunic that has been made for you. You slide it over your head and arms and let it drop around your waist before you reach for your crude but effective bow. You grip this, along with your quiver, before sliding the quiver over your shoulder and positioning the bow onto its grip within the arrow holder. Without much of a thought, you open the door and the light floods your still tired eyes. This doesn't stop you though, as you run forward to join the company that marches ahead of you. The walk is tiresome and it seems to take days, with only occasional breaks taken in the form of camps being set up. But before too long, you start to feel the temperature rise around you. You break into a sweat without much movement at all, and you know soon you'll be at your destination. Finally, the temperature rises to a point where it's hard to concentrate. You can stand in the heat, but it's not easy. You won't die, not with the water you have with you, but it's going to be an uncomfortable few days, you think to yourself. Fortunately for you, it doesn't take that long. The ground begins to move beneath you after walking for just a few minutes. It's not violent enough to be an earthquake, but rather something moving beneath you. The path appears to fissure. The cracks are clear as suddenly a small hole seems to explode, and a rock from where the hole appeared shoots off into the sky, before landing just before where a new creature sits. It's covered in white fur and has a mop of brown head upon its head. It sits, its body and head poking out of the ground, a smile across its face as it understands it has visitors. It goes to open its mouth, but before it can speak a word, it's shot cleanly by an arrow that pierces through the creature. You almost gasp. Suddenness of taking a life is a shock, but this is for the best. After all, its furs were becoming useful for clothing during the cold weather, and you and your people hadn't been used to that, as you'd always lived so much closer to the sun. Its claws would be your real prize though, the ability to fashion these into gloves which you could then dig down into the earth with. This wasn't the last time though. The trip was made multiple times after. The carcasses brought back to Skyloft where they would be harvested for their claws and fur. The furs would go on to be used for armour, clothes, bed clothing and almost any other item that materials could be replaced with, until there was no more. Time and time again, the poor creatures who would just want their treasure would be hunted down for their fur and claws until there was no more. The Mogma had become the first true, extinct race of Hyrule, a sad but very true part of life. Hylian's inbuilt need to survive, taking precedence over the existence of a creature that existed long before them. Of course though, this is a very hypothetical situation. We may have seen the Mogma attempt to gather treasure and fail, only to be met with their existence of a race. So how does this potentially unfold? The Great War of Eldin. He stands at the foot of the mountain. Yes, this will do nicely. Very nicely. As he approaches the base, standing in a pool of molten lava up to his ankles. Oddly, the heat didn't faze him one bit, much to his surprise when he found himself falling from the narrow path into the crimson mire below. He had not been here before, but something did feel oddly familiar in just being here. It felt comfortable, despite the creatures that had made themselves at home on the mountain parts. He couldn't put a finger on exactly why this felt familiar, but there was something about the location that made his skin tingle with excitement. That is, if he were to have skin. But what should have been was replaced with rock and gravel. They had always been this way, the Gorons. They were afflicted with this condition from birth, but had learnt how to adapt to how their bodies were. They learned that if they rolled rather than run, they would be quicker and more able to traverse mountainous paths. They had learned that if they ate rocks, it would add more to their strength. They learned that with their strength they could channel through mountains with their bare fists. They had learned so much in their short time of existence. But rocks were growing sparse. They had gorged themselves so much that the mountain that they had made a home was little more than a hill to them now. Their food source was in short supply, and soon they would have to move. They would need warmth, that much was certain. The last time the cold infected the caverns, many of the Gorons froze, almost solid. This meant their rock harvests were down that year, which made life almost impossible the year to come. They would need an abundant source of rock and mountains in order to carve out a new home. This would do very nicely indeed, thought the odd tattooed Goron to himself. It would be months since Gorko visited the volcano, but now the time had come for the grand exodus. Hundreds of Gorons would move today, from one mountain to an active volcano. They had decided, based on Gorko's reports, that this volcano would be absolutely perfect, and so curled themselves up as tight as they could be and rolled through the plains of Hyrule before finding themselves at the foot of the volcano. Strangely, it would not take long, or be met with any resistance save for a few monsters and Bokoblin that knew no better than to make the challenge that they couldn't win. And soon the Gorons had carved out of the mountain a large series of caverns, punching their way into surviving their last winter. In this utopia they would name a leader, and he would be responsible for ensuring strong harvests and no overeating. This would stop the issues that they had at their last home, making sure that they would survive on for generations and generations to come. They would do this quickly, and surely, just surely, Gorko thought to himself, that because he found this haven, their new home, he would have a chance of becoming the Goron leader. A legend in the making. Deep underground, however, something was afoot. The ground moved with a bustle of excitement, curling up on two sides and meeting in the middle as a mound, and it continued to form a line throughout the grounds of the newly crowned Goron city. It moved with speed and purpose, much to the amusement of a small baby Goron who followed the line. It wasn't attempting to catch the disturbance, but rather just observe it. Where was it going? What did it want? The baby followed, toddling along as the mound moved further and further into the caverns, dodging any adults that were stood or sat in his way. But soon his following would end. A wall stood in his way, and he wasn't yet strong enough to punch his way through this one. And even if he was, the trouble he would get in with the Elder would not be worth it. He would have to give up. With a sigh, he slumped to the floor, onto his bottom. Inside of a new room, the mound stopped dead in its tracks. It seemed that it found what it was looking for. With a burst, the rock flew upwards from within where the last molehill had been dug. And with a massive pop, the creature burst through the floor with a massive grin on his face. "Treasure!" he exclaimed excitedly, almost feeling his legs dance underneath him. He would need to be quick though. This stone was no ordinary rock, for stood behind him was a small gemstone, shaped like a diamond and no more than 2.5 inches across. It wasn't clear like a diamond though. It was a beautiful scintillating red, a ruby of massive worth. This would be wonderful as his contribution to the clan, not just for this day but maybe even for a year. After all, the danger he had faced to get here was insurmountable. He popped out of the hole entirely, his small feet carrying him across the room to the altar where the ruby sat. He smiled to himself as he snatched in front of him to grab it. His fingers wrapped around it. Bang! The door to the room had flown open, a boulder which sat in front of a hole which no one could access but the Goron Elder. "You!" he shouted, anger almost steaming out of his ears. The rodent-like man froze. His eyes widened, his smile faded. His mind whirred with 100,000 images all at the same time. He would have to turn around, he would have to evacuate, abandon mission. Quickly he scrambled, grabbing a hold of the gemstone as he did. The larger, more imposing rock creature above him scrambled in order to get hold of the quicker, more agile rodent. With a deft move, he slid between the Goron's legs and into the hole that he had formed earlier, feet first, where he then slunk into the caverns below. The danger was nowhere near over though. The Goron, in a fit of rage, began to pound at the floor, causing cracks and fissures that shook all of the ground above him. Yet, still he moved with purpose as the tunnels caved in behind him. Occasionally rocks would fall in front of him, but he would persevere, his clawed hands pummeling against the mud, clay and boulders in front of him. He had to escape. He needed to. Finally, he could see an opening in the mud around him. He was near, so very near. He would have his contribution. Finally, the Goron Ruby was his. This would not remain the case for long, however. As with every theft comes a story of retribution. And this retribution would be a hard lesson for the mole men that lived underneath the mountain that had been inhabited with rock people. It would not take long for the Gorons to form rank and begin punching through the floor of their own home. It would only take a few hours before the Gorons had made a crack in the ceiling of the creature's home below, but the Mogma had already made provisions to move out. That was until one of the avid treasure hunters pointed out that they could never make it out with all of their treasure. There was a lot of work put in to gaining this small hoard, and this small hoard would amount to a large fortune, and unfortunately that would be the downfall of the Mogma. They decided to stay. To defend their hoard, they would need to stand their ground. Luckily, they could bore through the rock. And not only that, they had their legendary crop littered all over here. It would be perfect. They would roll the bombs at the feet of these creatures and turn them into nothing more than living rubble. They would survive the scare. They would go on to keep hold of their precious prizes, including the newest addition to the hoard, bright red stone that glitters like a phoenix in flight. A thing of real beauty and value. Boom! A section of the ceiling gave way and crushed one of the mud huts that the Mogma had created in the settlement. Boom! Another section of the ceiling gave way, crushing one of the Mogma. Boom! This one was different. A boulder fell from the ceiling. No, not a boulder. A living being, built up as a boulder. Then another, then another. It was time. Bombs flew, but soon the Mogma were all killed. The Gorons had won the Battle of Eldin and would reclaim their prized possession, a stone that had been found in the making of this new home of theirs. They had agreed that this would be passed down from elder to elder for as long as Gorons existed as a sign of their leadership. This would be at the cost of the Mogma though. As time went on, the legend of this epic victory for the Gorons would be passed down through stories told to children. As time went on though, the story changed more and more, much as the case with legends, and one thing changed with it. The name of the mountain that this occurred on. See, Eldin Volcano, following the bloodshed, developed a nickname within the Kingdom of Hyrule, and that new name was Death Mountain. Today, we've seen three possible theories into what happened to the Mogma. The stories that are told within the Zelda games are amazing, as they are really open to fan interpretation and what we take from the games. I don't have a personal opinion as to which of these options is correct, and Nintendo has never made it obvious. And the Mogma just seemed to disappear straight after Skyward Sword. But it definitely was fun to come up with some ideas for what happened to them, and to develop some stories as to their ending. The Mogma story actually has the potential to be one of the darkest within the series, and it will be something that I would love to see explored more. Though I don't expect this to ever happen, as we're now well past the introduction to the series, and we're already exploring what happened to the Kingdom of Hyrule after the fall of humanity as a whole. Thank you so much for watching this today. It was a lot of fun to come up with. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, why not subscribe for some more similar content?